Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Steel Division Normandy 44. So today we're going to be talking about, in a tutorial sense, the importance of the air war and sort of one of the things that it can really lead to, because the air game in this game is a little bit distinct from the way that the rest of the game is balanced. Primarily in this game, the way things work is you put in resources and they eventually get sort of worn down as they get used, and the more they get used, for example your infantry, they get engaged in an infantry versus infantry battle, they're either going to run out of ammunition, or they're going to run out of manpower, or they're going to just outright get killed. And so each of these units sort of degrades over time. If you got a vehicle out in the field, it's going to it's going to start taking criticals, it's going to get detracked, it's going to get crew stunned or whatever, and it's eventually going to get wiped out. It's going to run out of ammunition or whatever. It's going to basically become a useless sort of unit. Or at the very best situation, you decide that you don't have anywhere to put it for the time being. You got to try and find somewhere to pull it back, and even then it can still get picked off by an opponent that's able to sort of find a way to do it, especially if they just drive an HS-129 towards it. So this game has got all these different components to it that sort of get committed to the field, and once they're committed, they're now at risk, and they sort of get worn down until they're no longer useful. That's okay, you just replace them, you bring in more. That's not really the case with the air game. The air game is distinct in that the air units that you bring onto the field remain useful as long as they're not destroyed. So while in a tank battle, there's sort of an element of the snowball going on in that if you win a tank duel, suddenly you're up a tank over your opponent, you each bring in another tank, well suddenly you've got two tanks, and he's got just the one, and this sort of goes back and forth in that sort of way. That's not how the air battle works. If I win with a Spitfire, then, you know, I've got a Spitfire, I bring in a second Spitfire, you're down your Messerschmitt, and, you know, you try and bring in another Messerschmitt, I'm able to bring two in one. The thing about the tank battle is you bring in another tank, you can focus them both together, but more likely you're going to have to put them in two separate spots. The other thing is the different way that the counters work in this game. If I want to counter you in the air battle, I have to bring in aircraft. With the tank battle, I don't have to bring in tanks to counter you. I can bring in an anti-tank gun instead. Anti-tank guns in this game work perfectly fine against other people's tanks and so on and so forth. But anti-aircraft guns don't actually deal any real damage to aircraft. They suppress them, they cause them to panic, they cause them to stop firing, and so on and so forth. But that's not really what you're aiming to do there. Over here we can see I should have just focused down that Pack 38 there, I could have killed it. But in any event, IG-18, so on and so forth, all this other stuff, so blah blah blah. In any event, because of the way that the air battle works, where your units aren't getting eroded and where you can only counter it with other air units, you end up in this weird state where if you win the air battle, you can keep winning the air battle and just keep making that more and more in your favor until you end up in the state where, you know, you can't lose the air battle anymore. You're just basically completely crushing them. Whereas that's not true with the infantry battle, that's not true with the tank battle. You can see over here I've got my stormtroopers killing a unit of fusiliers and an IG-18 and a Pack 38 here. None of that really matters that much. He can bring in more units here, he can bring in more stuff, and my units are getting kind of worn out. You can already see my stormtroopers out of grenades. That happened pretty quickly. Managed to do it without losing very much in terms of like the kangaroo or stuff like that, but he's still able to fall back with this Pack 38, so it's still on the field. It's still diminished, but gonna probably take a little while for me to actually get rid of that. In comes some Panzer 35Rs, and they're going to be able to, again, do some similar stuff. Units over here, we can see that some of my stuff's pinned down, some of my stuff's taking losses or what have you. Some of his stuff is also taking losses and what have you. So again, this is just all coming back to the fact that all these units are getting slowly worn down a little bit. You can see this rifle leader's lost a man, these rifles have lost a bunch of manpower. But all of these units are replaceable. All of these units are going to be easy to replace, and frankly, if my rifles get wiped out, I can just bring in more, but my opponent can also kill them with more than just his infantry. He can use all sorts of different tools to wipe out his infantry, just like I can use lots of different tools to wipe out his infantry. So the ground battle dynamic is very, very different, so it's important to understand the air war and the importance of winning the air war wherever you get a chance to. So just bringing over some stuff over to this way, but it really doesn't matter that much what's going on over here. This is actually where I should be getting some air power, but I don't think I do quite yet. Very expensive to get air power in this game. But again, you can see, like, you know, our scout vehicles here, we're pushing up with stormtroopers and stuff like that just a little bit. I think I get caught out in the open here with these stormtroopers and they get, like, wiped or something like that, but I don't think I managed to cross the gap quite. Yeah. Real damn shame. So anyway, I think that I bring in air units pretty soon here, but yeah, I can never remember quite the timings of these games. The thing is, you're playing it and you think that such a short amount of time has passed, but it's actually been like 15 minutes. You're in Phase B solidly. In any event, let's just fast forward this a little bit. My opponent's bringing up some of these panzers. I've actually brought in the ram. I'm not entirely sure why I did. I think I did it to deal with this Panzerjäger, but yeah, we just got a ram stationed here. It's going to be able to sort of threaten all this stuff pretty effectively. Panzerjäger is sort of backing off a little bit. This does give me an opportunity to march forward the Humber a little bit. We damage the transmission on the Panzerjäger, which is the only thing in the region that really has a realistic chance of taking out my ram, other than the Pak 38. But got this squad of panzers here, sort of wiping out all my stuff over here. But they're getting shot at and attacked by this ram as well. So he's actually able to take out all this stuff. But again, finally we see this first bomber strike. So what's this aircraft able to do? Well, it's able to pin down a lot of its troops, allowing some of my troops to move forward, allowing me to sort of stop taking as much damage from these guys. My stormtroopers here are not taking as much damage. And I'm able to sort of keep strafing these guys, and it's able to push these guys back and stop them from advancing too far forward. Now, I'm taking a lot of damage to the 6-pounder, which I'm surprised he can see, honestly. Not necessarily sure that you should be able to see that, but any event, a couple stormtroopers over there were just firing away with a Humber. Finally getting some shots on my tank with the Pak 38, but the Pak 38 is not a huge deal if you're in if you're talking about a Ram 2. The Ram 2 has actually got enough front armor that will just survive that. So, but yeah, we're gonna keep getting more and more air power onto these guys. You can see that this Spitfire Mark 9 here coming back in there for another go. Let's put it back down to normal speed. Able to pin down this unit of Grenadiers, and this Panzergrenadier has also been sort of forced to ground, and we're able to continue advancing up some infantry and so on and so forth. Humber just running itself out of ammunition here. So my opponent is at this point in time bringing in a bit of anti-air defense, because he knows that I've gone for a little bit of air, but this isn't really going to win him that air war. So it's very, very important to just remember, to win the air war, you actually have to be killing enemy airplanes. And you have to be compelling him to bring out the fighters, and you have to be killing those fighters. We're still racking up a +1 in terms of score here, so we're at a +0 now, but we've had a +1 for quite a while at this point in time, so it doesn't matter too much if I'm not able to keep that ticking for a while. Humber unfortunately runs into a Pak 38 there, instantly killed. Good job, guys. I was hoping that I'd get some more shots on them, but unfortunately it just gets these other Grenadiers. This does give me time to like storm the gap with these Stormtroopers though, so that's all I really needed, so I'm okay with that. Over here, got some shots coming in from the Panzerjäger. Firing at the rifles. It's a little bit weird that Panzerjägers have high explosive, but it's pretty poor high explosive, so it's not really a big deal. And again, in comes the bomber. And I can just keep doing this. Like, there's really nothing to stop me from just continually putting in bombing strikes now that I've got a bomber out there. So he has to find an answer to it, and that's what this anti-aircraft gun is supposed to be. Stormtroopers managed to come in across the right there and start cutting across this side here. They're going to be able to take out like all these guys by themselves, but here you can see, like, even though I've dropped bombs, still useful, still able to cause damage, still able to cause casualties before being pushed back by the Flakvierling. And the Flakvierling, again, it is there, but it's not able to stop me from dropping the bombs. It wasn't able to stop me from doing a strafing run, and it wasn't able to kill my Spitfire Mark 9. So we're going to be able to continue using that bomber for quite some time now. So my opponent's still just pounding away with all his stuff here. Let's go ahead and move ourselves forward a little bit here in time as we continue our dumbass rifle exchange here, where my stuff all gets pinned down constantly by his stupid MG42, which I should be bombing instead of these guys, but whatever. It doesn't really actually matter. I kind of also have to bomb out this MG42 over here. Now, I could be using artillery, but the thing about artillery strikes is that they're actually fairly inaccurate in this game. So let's go ahead and slow this down again. So again, same bomber coming in against this SMG-42, able to drop those bombs. Flakvierling, incapable of actually stopping it, it actually wipes that out, and we're able to continue our aerial bombing raids because, again, Flakvierling chases my guy away so I can't do the strafing runs afterwards, but that doesn't stop me from having these air raids. Now, my opponent's bringing in a bunch of stuff. I think he forgot one of his Collins for one of those minutes there. I think that I've spent mine on sort of infantry and air stuff, so that is probably why I don't have as much stuff to bring in. But you know, he's also bringing in fairly cheap troops, if I recall correctly. Nothing too expensive, because like these are Kubels, but I don't think that these are Kubel MGs. Yeah, that's just a naked Kubel, so those are free, just paying the infantry cost on these guys. So at this point in time, like, my opponent's spreading Flakvirlings around, and this is not going to stop me bombing him. Like, these are excellent units still, because they're able to shred infantry apart completely. So if he needs to destroy one of my infantry units, those things work very well. He's bringing in a PAC 38 and an IG-18 to the center here, but you know, this is all well and good for certain things, but is not good for other things. Over here, Kangaroo and my rifle is going to start taking some shots here. We're going to be able to return a bit of fire there with the Kangaroo, thankfully, which has a 50 cal of its own, so we're able to deal some pretty good damage. And then we got the sniper scouts moving in there from behind, and they're able to start popping some shots against that MG as well, so very effective there. Taking some shots because our troops are in the wrong kind of terrain here, and we're just falling back behind the tree line over there, but we can bring in some more bombers pretty soon here. And if this area gets bombed, it's going to be a pretty bad situation for them in some respects there. 6-pounder firing away at some Kubels and stuff like that, but unfortunately they've got a good bead on that with their IG, and that's going to stop me from firing with that for a second. But in comes again the Spitfire, and unfortunately he actually does have enough flak in the area to stop me from bombing, which is kind of surprising to me. And this is something that you can eventually do, is get enough to stop someone from being able to bomb you out. But it does take an awful lot of anti-aircraft capability before that actually works. At this point in time, like, I've kind of got my tree line, he's kind of got his tree line, we kind of got both of our sectors where they happen to be, but we still can't really push forward, he can't really easily push forward. This Fusilier is fighting my rifle leader, which is a really stupid thing for me to be fighting with, because I've got stormtroopers right here, so we just sort of do a swap. These stormtroopers sort of move up there, fight the Fusiliers instead. But he's got a Panzer 35 RF there as their sort of backup for it, so even though I've got a couple of units of disparate stormtroopers here, I'm not really in the best positions. I think we do manage to get off the bundle explosive though, so even though we're under fire and get like wipes by Flakvirling and the other guys, we do manage to take a good chunk out of them with the TNT there, so that happens, and then these things just open up and completely destroy everything, because an IG-18 is just easily capable of wiping that sort of thing out. But we do actually take out the expensive scout unit with our incomplete units of other things. IG-18 getting pinned down and destroyed by the Kangaroo, but at this point in time what we really need to do, I think the Kangaroo actually gets taken out by the PAC, but yeah, there we go. So what we really need to do is actually just sort of suppress the Flakvirling, and I know that there's a build up here, so what I've actually opted to do is just send in 2 Spitfires with bombs. And what happens is the first one absorbs all that fire from that first one, and we're able to actually drop those bombs down in this sort of cluster here, doing some pretty good damage to that Flakvirling and some damage to the Panzer Grenadiers and the SMG and the Grenadier. So this is able to get us some damage to all this sort of stuff here. We're able to get some shots on the IG-18. I think we end up falling back with the Kangaroo, or maybe it gets killed by the Panzer 385, 35F or whatever. And we also can't really hold here against these guys with just the rifle leader, so you know, it would be nice if I could call in some more bombing runs against this sort of stuff, but I should actually be calling them in against this more exposed left flank, because they've got no Flakvirlings over on that side. Now, why am I not calling in artillery? Well, it's just that the Panzer, the artillery that the Canadians have, the 25-pounder and the Sexton, are both excellent anti-tank units, but I have difficulty actually finding them ever landing their shots. They almost always miss by a large enough distance that they're kind of useless in that sort of sense. So it's almost always better for me to just bring in aircraft, because I'm able to strike where I need to with what I need to, and just really hit those units hard, which isn't really possible with the other types of units out there. I think Kangaroo comes around and gets pegged by the Panzer 35R. Now, the Kangaroo actually has a ton of armor for what it is for a troop transport, so it's actually not that terrible at surviving these sorts of shots, but it's still not great. Some Grens here moving forward, I'm able to sort of back out with the Kangaroo, but it still gets hit. Side armor hit shot in particular, I think, in this particular case, but still able to push forward with our Sherman 3 here, and that's more than enough to take a Panzer 35RF. So you can see that I actually do bring in the 2-star Sexton, and it knows where this SMG 42 is. I'm aiming at it directly, like I right-clicked it, but I'm not going to be able to land a hit on it for an awful large number of shots. It's kind of ridiculous how poor these things are at hitting their target. Like, it would be nice if I had brought in a 3-star variant. I think I've switched over to target the Flakvirling, And once we get that going, but here is another thing that we need to talk about. This is the Ju-87G. This is an anti-tank plane. It's capable of destroying a Sherman extremely easily. Now, it will actually be able to often destroy your tank before you can actually scramble your fighters and actually kill it before it kills your tank, if your tank is past the halfway line like mine is. So this means that it's able to pretty easily take out my tank here. Engine destroyed, and it's immediately evac'd. Now, I'm able to get behind it with Spitfire, thankfully, because this is quite slow, but since my opponent has flak drilling here, he's going to be able to chase away my airplane quite effectively. But okay, that's fair enough. I bring in another one to try and follow, and it's also going to get chased away by the flak drilling way before it can catch up to this. So if you're able to dominate the skies, however, enough with the allies, you can stop these things from coming in and destroying all of your tanks. Now, my Sherman here actually is kind of now just a pillbox, because it still has the ability to fight back, since it's only got tracks broken, so it's going to actually start firing at stuff that sort of shows up near it, but it's not capable of moving, so it's just one of those things. I don't know. It will eventually get taken out if I recall correctly, but what we're doing here is just suppressing this flak drilling. If we can get it suppressed enough, we can actually do bombing runs against different units and not have to worry about the counter battery from it. You can see the Sherman actually beginning to prepare to fire, and you can see that's turrets now on rotation, starting to fire at these Grens, who then sort of run back behind the tree line because my opponent is lucky shit. Sometimes they sort of run towards your units, but we're not getting that lucky here. Yeah, so Sexton still firing away at this flak drilling and still hasn't actually hit anything. Stormtroopers, 3-star Stormtroopers. Gonna be able to deal some damage to these Grenadiers, regardless of whether or not they end up getting then pinned down and wiped out by tank fire and flak drilling fire and all that other crap. But since we're within leadership radius of the rifles leader, we're able to fall them back past the tree line. They run in a kind of stupid direction and I lose a bunch of them, but it's still fine. And again, like, this is a tight concentration of troops. Like, if I had the off-map, I probably would be doing better here. I should probably have been using off-map, but I don't like relying on it too much. My opponent over here has an SK-17 or whatever. It's having similar luck. We're running in with a bombing strike. We managed to drop one of our sets of bombs on the flak drilling here. And what this does is it lets us bring in our Spitfire Mark 9, and this is going to come after the FW Flanker Wolf 190, which actually takes it out. And so the fact that I was able to bomb the flak drilling, and then bring in fighters, you can't depend on this anti-aircraft crap to actually defend you against aircraft. It just doesn't happen. Like, I can just send in 2 bombers. Those bombers are going to knock this thing out of commission, even if it doesn't kill it. And then I can send in my fighters and then stop him from taking out my stuff in the air. So it's just kind of ridiculous how that sort of works there, because now I just go and heal it back up and it's fine. Bouncing some shots on one of my Shermans here, which then returns fire and wipes out one of their anti-tank guns because they're using a light anti-tank gun still. The particular variant of the pack that they've got there is just not really capable of standing up. So that's all well and good. Opponent's still sort of getting hammered by artillery, but again, the Sexton just isn't doing the job at taking out these support elements. I've actually taken out like a full-on MG with one of my bombing runs, and I've taken out more infantry than I have with these continual attacks. So at this point in time, my opponent brings in a Flanker Wolf 190 to try and take out my bomber, which again comes after this flak drilling, and the bombs actually land on target, I think, but then what ends up happening, I suspect, is that my opponent actually manages to get sort of away since he was running away with flak drilling. Over here, the Ju-87 sort of, again, breaks the tracks of another one of my planes. We actually go for the FW-190. He actually took out one of my Spitfires, but it was one of the cheap Spitfire bombers. And we switch targets now that this guy's fallen back with one of our guys, since we know that we can keep chasing him, and start going after him. Because if we can take this guy out, then, he's down, and then he's down. So we've got really good air dominance. We've still got our 2 fighters, and we've got 1 Spitfire bomber. We're going to be able to bring in Mosquitoes in the later game. So we're still going to have plenty of air power, whereas my opponent is now down a couple Fokker Wolves and one of his very important Junker 87s. So he's lost the ability to really easily use that to destroy my vehicles, which is a huge bonus. Like, if I'm trying to push forward with Rams and Shermans and stuff like this as the allies, and I've lost the ability to use armored vehicles, that really kills my ability to push against the 352 infantry. So if the 352 infantry is able to just sort of continually stay in position with MG 42s and all of their other crap here, like their Fusiliers, their long-range weapons, and their other sort of in-place weapons, their IG-18s or whatever, yeah, IG-18s, if they're able to sort of stay in place with all those sorts of things, then they're able to do tremendous damage to me, and I'm not really able to sort of counteract that without using vehicles, because infantry just cannot move forward against that kind of stuff. Able to get in a ridiculous kind of push here with kangaroos, because kangaroos are absolutely amazing. We're coming in with a Bedford supply to try and get some more grenades for these stormtroopers, but I think I get them killed before they can actually do that, because what ended up happening was just a really lucky random shot killed my my command infantry, and I'm pushing forward, which I really shouldn't be since there's Grens up here. So, but by pushing forward, we're able to sort of get vision here, and this is, I think, when I sort of realized that they've got a lot more built up in here than I thought they did. We're able to get some shots in on those grenadiers, and it's able to deal some pretty decent damage to them, but we're still going to lose these stormtroopers pretty quickly. Just the fire from these units is too high. Get the one unit pinned down. But, yeah, we're trying to move some more infantry into there. We're still under fire from this artillery. Of course, we're still firing our artillery at him. We still haven't killed either of the flak Virlings, and we've been firing at them basically continually with our stupid Sexton. Like, this is a 2-star artillery piece. It should have high accuracy, but it never seemed to hit anything. We finally take this out, I think. I think this shot does. Yeah, there we go. Only took us... I think that took us, like, 7 minutes of continual firing. With the Sexton, so, you know, kudos to it and its ability to get stuff done, I guess. Similarly, like their SK-18, longest range artillery in the game as far as I remember. I think it's an 8,000 or 7,000 or 4,000, sorry, meter range artillery piece. Makes it the longest in the game, but he's sort of bailed out one of my units with flak 41 88mm. Now this is an anti-air unit, and again, it sort of falls into the same sort of weakness as these flak Virlings and stuff like that, in that I can just run 2 bombers at a time at it. It won't shoot down any bombers, and once I've hit it with something, I can then sort of follow up with another bomber, and that's going to kill it. And that sort of ends up being one of the things that kind of happens. Now, I do actually think I moved the Sexton's artillery fire over to it, and I finally brought in like the off map. I'm sort of sick of my Sexton not doing anything to these targets here, and we're starting to fire away at it with a Sherman 3 here, but a flak 41 is actually plenty enough to kill a Sherman. I don't really know what I was thinking bringing a Sherman to fight that, but it doesn't really make a huge difference at this point in time. Snipers firing away here. You can see that I've brought in some of that mortar fire. And since I know where his stuff is, I can be able to sort of start hammering it. It's a little bit far back for me to just be using bombers against it, though, because it puts me in a really vulnerable spot. That was bailed out. It really didn't matter if he killed the ram or not there. It's already incapable of fighting back, so... Like, all my shots are going towards this SDKF Z7 here for some reason, instead of towards the thing that I'm targeting. So this is the amount of scatter. I think that they need to change the accuracy algorithm for these things, because these things take so long to get a shot on target, and when they do, they don't really do much damage. So, I don't know. I don't think that actually making them more accurate, though, would be a great idea, because I don't want to see artillery just consistently one-shotting things. I just want it to land near enough that it kind of does damage, instead of what it does, which is it doesn't really do anything. We are getting some suppression, though, I suppose, down on it, which is good enough, I guess. Here we end up going, like, we're bringing in 2 Spitfire fighters here. So we've managed to get this thing pinned down before it could even panic a single one of these. And they've got, actually, the flak Virling 51 right behind there. So theoretically, they should have plenty enough anti-air to stop me from doing this sort of just suicide attack with my fighters. But one of the more important things I learned from this is that my opponent doesn't have an anti-air response against this. There's another flak 41 over on this side. It's able to get a shot off at my Spitfire bomber. But again, we're just able to run in with Spitfire bomber, drop our bombs on the flak 41, and cause it to panic. Our ship, our guy sort of panics, falls back. These guys are all panicking, falling back, so we're able to sort of now pursue a little bit. Ram to op is what I decided to use to break through this area here. We see some drop down here. I should really have been putting it down here, but I don't think I actually cared about this knot. It really doesn't matter if they stay there or not. Rifles over here sort of doing their thing. This flak 41 getting hammered by my Sexton, but again, Sexton can't do anything, so... Just like these things, like able to hit a 3-man group of infantry with theirs, but I'm not able to hit something the size of like a goddamn 2-story building. Good job, guys. There we go. Got a hit, killed 2 of them. Sherman that's been disabled putting in the work takes out one of their panzers. Good times. Alright, so they open up fire with these Panzer Grenadiers here a little bit. I'm just sort of chasing down with my Kangaroos, but here comes like that off map, starts putting some work onto these Grenadiers, and you can see that, again, like the artillery doesn't actually deal that much damage. So I'm going to be able to push forward a little bit here when we sort of use this barrage to creep in with the artillery there. But again, we see that this thing's been panicking for quite a while now, and that was because of that initial airstrike. Opponent's sort of bringing in some shells to stop my advance here, but like at this point in time, my opponent's kind of in a weird spot because we sort of spotted him out, and that allows us to put a lot of fire down into this forest line here. I should actually be pushing forward a little bit with these rifles as well as these rifles, but it doesn't really matter all that much. I think we've taken out some of these guys here. Still just firing shots at this Flak 41, still not actually getting any goddamn kills. So yeah, like over here, we still see my opponent's got lots of anti-air, but he can't bring in an air response. He's already missing too many of his important Messerschmitts, and without his Junkers 87, it really doesn't matter if he does contest the air, because his main asset in the air, which is the ability to wipe out my tanks quickly, just really isn't that important anymore. We're able to see some finally slightly on-target artillery strikes here against this Flak 41. Now he does actually get just run in with a Grenadier against my Kangaroo, which sucked, but it happens. So that's going to give me a bit of time, though, to get in with the Ram 2 op. It's going to get me the ability to put time-on-target artillery onto the Flak 88 over here, and it's slow enough that it's not going to have an easy time getting out of there. We sort of have like this Ram 2 op running in and starting to trade shots with the Flak, and it's pretty heavily armored, but it's still not going to be able to survive a shot from this range kind of that easily. So that's it's not ideal, but getting some stormtroopers up, though, they'll be able to take out these Grens, no problem. Over here, this Flak 41 falling back, and at this point in time, I've now got the ability to bring in air again. Off-map wipes out the little truck there, so that's a little bit of their AA taken out. This guy actually survives with this stupid thing while it's under machine gun fire, retreating from falling artillery shells on sector, so he is a lucky asshole. I think it ends up having like 2 crew when it gets out of this. In comes like an FW 190 A8, and like it's trying to stop my Spitfire Mark 9 here that's sort of coming in unsupported to try and take out this guy. I think he actually ends up taking it out in the end. He's also got like this HS-129 over there, but he's forced to fall it back, and I'm actually able to just bring in the Spitfires again, take these guys out. We come in for a strafing run against the Flak 41 here. This gives him enough time to bring in the HS-129 against one of my tanks, if I recall correctly, but like this guy still has not gone down, you asshole. Bringing in a heavier bomber at this point in time. I'm kind of sick of some of his shit here, so we're just using the Mosquito bomber against that. Able to take it out. HS-129 still sort of loitering around there, but we haven't actually retreated with the Mosquito yet, so we sort of bring it around to fight the HS-129, and since he's down some flak, it's a little bit harder for him to make my Mosquito fall back as quickly, and this is a very heavily armored vehicle, so it's able to survive this a lot better. Finally take out that stupid thing with the machine gun on the Ram 2, so that just took forever. He hasn't really done too much damage. He's forced a ram back, but that's not really a big deal. And we're able to get behind him with our new Mosquito, which we brought in. And this is, again, that sort of accumulation. I haven't really lost very many aircraft, so every time that I do one of these call-ins, I'm able to get more and more air power, and he has less and less air power. I forget what I ended up dropping those on. Looks like we just dropped them on some half-tracks and that Flak 41 over there. So, able to knock out one of their Flak, or their trucks there, and pin down, of course, the Flak 41, which is also nice, but not that important. I bring in some time on target over here. I don't know why I did that. That was a ridiculous way. I actually have another one of these that I can call in, though, so it doesn't really matter. I should have been pushing forward with these guys, but I figured he probably would have reinforced by now. So, all he's got is this Flak drilling, though. And it really doesn't matter. I can sort of lay back on my currently accumulated point total here. Sherman 3 with the tracks broken is still able to put out some fire, which is great. And at this point in time, my opponent surrenders. So let's take a look at our kills here. The Spitfire Mark 9, they managed to take out one of their Grenadiers, the bomber. This one took out an SMG-42. the Spitfire Mark 9 over here took out their Flanker Wolf 190A8 and their Junker 87G, which is really important to take out there. This one's really nice to take out because it's also 2-star veterancy. This one managed to take out a Flanker Wolf 190 and another Flanker Wolf 190, including one of their aces. If we look further down, we can see that our Mosquito managed to take out a Flak 41 88mm. These things are ridiculously hard to take out. You can see how useless my artillery was at taking things out, but once you bring in the Mosquitoes, they're just able to come in and take out key targets wherever you need to take them out. So we were able to sort of accumulate a large air force, and that air force was able to dominate the air and pin down key targets that were sort of like a lot of those units would have been able to wreak ridiculous amounts of damage if they were able to continually fire at me. But since we were able to pin them down consistently with Spitfires and with Mosquitoes and other air raids and so on and so forth, and since also we were able to force our opponents to take in lots of half-tracks that had anti-air capability, we really disabled my opponent's ability to fight effectively in a lot of places. So that air war accumulating more and more in my favor really did harm my opponent's ability to sort of win that game. And this is sort of how you win that air war. Make sure you're taking out opponent's fighters and stuff like that, and make sure that you then control the skies, because if your opponent loses enough fighters, your fighters are still full health. It doesn't matter if they got damaged. It doesn't matter if they almost got shot down. It doesn't matter if they ran out of ammo. It doesn't matter if they ran out of fuel, because you'll still have them. You'll be able to bring them in again. They'll be full health, full fuel, full ammo. So let's go take a look at the battle groups, and there's a sort of asymmetry to this, like I said. If we go ahead and take a look at these guys, they've got access to this Ju-87 and the HS-129s, and these things are tank shredders. If you're up against a faction that relies on tanks to move forward, like the Canadians do to a certain extent, because they have a fairly limited amount of artillery that they can take, then you can actually just have a bunch of forests with IG-18s, and the infantry can't move forward against these. If you've got 6 of these on the field in good positions, if you go to your infantry tab and you've got a bunch of these SMG-42s, and that's really all you need. Like, you will have a line that allied player will not be able to break through, and you'll sort of be able to sort of bomb them slowly into submission with your own artillery and stuff like that, or more importantly, yeah, actually you can just bomb them into submission. The thing about this is that you can just use the Nebelwerfer if you see an enemy position, Nebelwerf it a bunch of times, and then move your infantry into it, because you do actually have fairly decent amounts of good infantry with this deck. So, you know, there are other ways to do it with different German decks, but that's really the thing about this one. If you're able to control the air, you can really dictate the flow of the game, because you can control who has tanks. If the allied player has no tanks, he has no pushing power against you, really. And you don't need to take a lot of those anti-air units, and you don't really need to take a lot of those tanks of your own, and you don't need to take anti-tank units, whereas your opponent's going to keep taking anti-tank units. Those anti-tank units are going to get hit by Nebelwerfers, but if he doesn't have those anti-tank units, then you're just going to roll forward with something like a Stug or something like that. And even though the Stug isn't great, it's still enough to force your opponent to take anti-tank weapons. And honestly, a Stug 3G is actually not that bad a vehicle in and of its own right. But it also lets them sort of just keep moving forward with their Ersatz-Truppen, with their Grenadiers, and so on and so forth, and just sort of move forward across the map with that air superiority and air cover against you, and there's not a whole lot you'll be able to do to stop them. What will essentially happen is, like, since you don't have infantry support guns, they just sort of walk to within range of your guns. Your machine guns and your infantry open fire. Their infantry support guns, the IG-18 sort of open fire. You've got nothing that can really retaliate against those other than the high explosive on something like, say, a priest. But if they've got a priest, you just bring in an HS-129 or Junkers 87. Either of those just comes in, wipes out the priest, and your lines keep going forward. If he's got a bunch of AA, then the AA shoots at this thing. It has killed the priest, and it sort of wheels around, goes home. It's done its job, it's killed the priest, it gets repaired, it gets refueled, and so on and so forth. You see another priest or something like that, you see a Sherman, out comes one of the J-87s, it goes and kills the Sherman, or detracts it, as the case happens to be, and it gets shot at by flak and stuff like that. You Nebelwerfer some of the flak, and then it gets damaged and it goes home again. So you need to be able to make sure that you can do that with these guys. If you're able to do that, then you can really control the game. Conversely, as the allies, you know, like, while you don't instantly win the tank game because of this, like, if I'm looking at the Canadian deck, for example, you know, I've got no AT tank killing planes. The best I've got is the Typhoon, and it's not great. There is a Typhoon anti-tank variant. The problem with the Typhoon anti-tank is that you'll never kill a tank with it. So it's kind of useless as well as far as that actual roll goes. But the nice thing about, like, controlling the air is that you can take out those important support guns, and the Germans without their support guns are a lot more vulnerable against the Canadians and against the Allied forces, because at that point, with those infantry decks, they're stuck using Stugs against things like Panzers, against things like Shermans, and the Shermans can win those fights if you're careful with your Shermans. And in any event, if I'm rolling up 17 pounders and he's got no infantry support guns, he's not got no flak railings because I've mosquito bombed all of them, and he's been forced to take lots of these stupid half tracks with the anti-aircraft capability, then what's going to happen is, like, my tanks are going to start rolling forward. He's going to have no anti-tank capability. His tanks are going to start rolling forward, and they're going to get hit by 17 pounders that are basically in the open field, because he's got no infantry cover. So, like, whoever rules the skies has a major advantage in one of the sort of fields there. For the Canadians and Allied forces, typically speaking, it means that your opponent is not going to have very good support weapons, or those support weapons are going to be pinned down by air raids. For the Axis forces, it means that you can either do the same thing, destroying support weapons, which honestly is less important since the Allied support weapons are weaker, typically speaking, or more importantly, you can just wipe out their tanks, which have the better support weapons on the Allied side. Because if we take a look at a Sherman 3, for example, here. Get this to load here. It's got a lot of high explosive power. Even the gun at long range there, with the high explosive value of the main 75mm, is very good anti-infantry capability. So you would want to not mess with a Sherman Mark III if it's able to fire out your anti-tank guns. If they've got like a couple Shermans stacked up and a couple Kangaroos sort of charging forward, they can actually suppress and destroy anti-tank emplacements pretty easily with just those armored vehicle pushes in a fairly cost-effective way. So you kind of have to watch out for that as the Germans. And if you're able to then just take out a couple Shermans on a strafing run with your air, then that really dulls that sort of push there, and it makes that your anti-tank emplacements are able to pick off a smaller number of tanks instead of a really big armor push. Whereas if you're taking out the Canadian, if you were to take out all the Canadian 17-pounders and stuff like that, yeah, that would still be effective as well. But generally speaking, the 17-pounders only fired after it's sighted and already killed one of your tanks. So, the German tanks are so expensive by contrast to the Canadian tanks that it really is a bad trade-off, whereas if you were able to take out a German tank with a 17-pounder, that's a really good trade. If you're the Canadians, on the other hand, and you've got a Sherman rolling forward and it gets taken out by an enemy AT position, but then you take out the AT position in retaliation, that actually almost works out okay in the end there. So I wouldn't worry as much about that if I was the Canadian player and I traded a tank for an AT, because these tanks are pretty cheap. They're pretty disposable sort of things there. So anyway, that's our look at the importance of air and winning the air battles. Hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.